Welcome back to another Money Tip Monday. I'm Lizy Hofer. I'm a residential loan officer here in the Phoenix areas, teaching smart money principles to help you make great home purchases. Today on Money Tip, I want to talk to you about refinancing. It's all over the news, these historic low interest rates, but I want to make sure that if you decide to do a refinance, that it makes the best financial sense for you and your family. Now, before I get into all of that though, I am gonna need you to like, comment, and subscribe to this awesome channel because I know you'll never wanna miss a money tip in the future. So why do people refinance in the first place? Well, let me tell you, there's a myriad of reasons, but I'm gonna tell you what the most common are. And the most obvious is interest rate, right? Dropping your interest rate, dropping your monthly payment. And then there's taking home equity out, and people do this for other investments, for home improvements, for debt consolidation. And then there is the extension or the shortening of a loan term, right? And one of the last and most popular is dropping off mortgage insurance, right? So those are the four main reasons that I see people refinancing. There we go. But there are other things like, changing loan types, freeing up their VA eligibility. There's a variety of other reasons why people refinance, but those are the four that are the most common and the things that I'm going to be addressing in this video. Now, what do you need to consider, right, if you're refinancing? Again, it's your interest rate, right, and the relationship to your initial rate, right? I usually advise people that you want to refinance if you are dropping more than 1% or saving $200 a month. For me, the reason that makes sense is because the savings is significant enough where you would pay back the cost of refinancing anywhere between 2 and 4 years. Now, depending on what you plan on doing though with your refinance, costs can be upwards of 3 to 6%. And so you really want to make sure that when you are refinancing, there is a significant difference in the monthly payment. Otherwise, you're just adding on to your loan term, which means more interest and more payments for a longer period of time. Now, the second thing that I tell people to consider, truthfully, is how long they actually plan on being in this property and or plan on owning the property, right? So if this is a house that you plan on owning for a very long time, refinancing makes sense, right? If you're gonna be saving, considerable amounts of money. One of the worst things that I see people do is refinance their home and then 6 months later decide that they want to be in a different area, they want a larger property. And so they end up refinancing their home, tacking on all these costs, and then never actually recouping the benefit. The other thing that I see people do is they do many refinances, right? So they refinance every year or so, right? And all they end up doing is using up all of their equity just to save $50 or $75. People who typically fall under this scheme, are calling on those mailers that they receive in the email, right? They're checking on mortgage rates all the time. And let me tell you, the people who are really, really great salesmen, they all work for mortgage chop shops calling you to save you $50 a month. If it isn't a significant savings to the length of time that you plan on being in the home, don't do it. So it leads me back to costs, right? So when you do a refinance, there are two types of costs. There are the non-reoccurring costs for mortgage, for title, and then you have reoccurring costs for taxes, homeowners insurance, and then interest, right? So the reoccurring costs typically are refunded back to you from your previous mortgage company, even though we're collecting for them again in a refinance. So just know when I talk about the cost of a refinance, I'm actually talking about the cost to actually get the new mortgage, right? So whatever it costs you if you're buying down points, your mortgage company costs, and the title fees, and then if there's any transfer taxes, again, things that you would have to pay if you are refinancing depending on your state. Here are things to really consider, right? So when I'm evaluating, does it make sense to refinance? Typically, I will take the monthly savings divided by the cost and figure out my break even in terms of months. I typically don't include the reoccurring because, like I said, you get refunded with your old loan depending on how much you've collected. And also just note that if you were to apply that to the balance of your home, that should be a wash, right? And that's my pro tip for not having to increase your loan more than it needs to be in terms of loan balance. But that's how you'll calculate if it actually makes sense in terms of costs. My good rule of thumb is no more than 4 years, right? Break even, because the average homeowner will stay in their home, 7 to 10 years. And depending on when you got your mortgage, you have to evaluate how many years you are already into that 7 to 10. Now, one other thing that I do want you guys to be aware of, because most consumers forget this, is that you're always one payment in the rear, regardless of what your mortgage balance will say on your credit report or your monthly statement. And that is because when you started making your mortgage payments, you skipped the following month. That payment never gets forgotten. It's not a freebie. It actually gets tacked on to the end of your mortgage. So most consumers don't actually know that their payoff balance will be more than what they think they owe, right? Just a side tip that I'd love for you to know. Let's get into today's market, right? Because there's gonna be so much news regarding how low interest rates are. So here's the thing, I think it's an excellent time right now to refinance, primarily because rates are in the mid 3s and they look like they're heading into the low 3s, right? So for me, if you were somebody that has mortgage insurance, you have 20% equity, you know that you're gonna be in your property for, a long period of time, now makes a ton of sense. I'm personally refinancing my own property because I know I'm gonna be there for a long time, and you can see significant amount of savings. My personal refinance is actually breaking even in about 18 months, which is really excellent, right? And I plan on being there until my children are like 18 years old. So I'm definitely going to break even on this, which makes me so happy. One thing that I plan on doing though, is I plan on continuing to make the same mortgage payment though. I have no intentions of decreasing my monthly savings because it's my intention to pay that home loan off as quickly as possible. So this is something that I try to encourage most people to do, right? If you're already comfortable and we already know that you qualified for it, let's get those payments or mortgages paid off as quickly as possible. Now, the other thing that you might want to consider because interest rates are so low is maybe going into a 15-year term, right? A lot of times you can keep a very similar monthly payment to what you're accustomed to, right? By just going down in term because rates are so low, right? Definitely something worth considering. And even though your break even won't be in terms of cost, it will be in terms of monthly savings, right? With the number of years that you've knocked off in payments and interest. So one other thing that people really talk about a lot when interest rates are so low is doing debt consolidations. And here's my caveat with that, because it's difficult for me to encourage people to finance their debts into a 30-year mortgage, primarily because you're extending out those payments for such a long time. And when you really consider the amount of interest you'll pay over 30 years, sometimes it's a lot more than you would pay if you just committed to making payments on your short-term debt. But here's the thing, cash flow is so important to people. And I helped a client recently, save $750 a month in their retirement because they're on a fixed income. That's a whole lot more important to their financial situation than having, paying off the debt and paying off their mortgage quicker. Having that monthly cash flow makes a whole lot more sense to their budget. So here's what I'll say. If you've done the math and you're gonna save a significant amount of interest and your cash flow makes sense, right? Definitely refinance, but also make sure that you're putting safeguards in place to prevent you from re-spending the money. Things I hate seeing are people doing cash out refinances just to get more and more in debt and then using up all of their home equity, right, to pay, for things that they don't really need. This is where people get into jeopardy. This is what happened to people in the early 2000s. They used their house equity kind of like revolving credit, and then when the market tanked, they had nothing to fall back on. So I just want to, say that out loud because I am a concerned financial consultant, right? I want to make sure that if you are refinancing to consolidate debt, you're not getting into more debt and you aren't paying more in the long haul. So the last and final reason that people refinance is to get rid of mortgage insurance. Now, I'm gonna give you a pro secret about mortgage insurance that may or may not save you from refinancing. So if you have a conventional mortgage, so not an FHA and not a VA, right? A conventional mortgage, and you have mortgage insurance and you've had the property more than 2 years, if you have 25% equity, you can request to have the mortgage insurance come off. Now, that's 25% equity that you have personally paid into the mortgage. It's, that the house is appreciated, that you've done renovations, right? But it is a time when you can request it. Now, the mortgage company itself is going to go ahead and do their own independent valuation. So it's a coin toss with whether or not it will actually come up, but this could save you money on having to refinance if you already have a rate in the 3%. Now, the other thing to consider is if you've paid down your mortgage, right, to 80%, that is another time to go ahead and request that the mortgage insurance come off. Many people think that it will automatically come off, but let me tell you, it does not automatically stop until you've reached 78%, right, loan to value. So very, very important that you pay attention to those numbers. If you are somebody, again, who needs to refinance, right, or you're under the 2 years and you definitely have room for, dropping in the interest rate, we just want to make sure that you have significant savings, right? Look, if you're saving $100, I don't know if that's enough money to refinance unless you're going to be really living in the property for a long time. So let's look into it. I'm happy to review all of your numbers, your budgets. If you follow our Smart Steps budget, right, this will be a really good indication on whether or not refinancing makes sense for you. So if you have any questions, want to start a dialogue, want to send me a DM for a future money tip, don't be afraid to reach out. I love, love, love reading the comments. I love getting your emails. They mean the world to me. So until next week, guys, I hope you have a phenomenal week, and see you on another Money Tip Monday.